The hum of the lecture hall's filtration vents buzzed like a trapped insect. Tiered rows of multi-species students sat in half-shadows, light filtering from the amber-hued windows high above. Hover screens flickered with anatomical diagrams, scrolling through musculature and nerve clusters of comparative species. At the podium, Professor Zyrath's elongated limbs tapped at the console, pulling up an image of a human skeletal frame. His compound eyes shimmered under the light. "This," he began, his voice dry and clicking with condescension, "is Homo sapiens. Soft-tissued, fragile-jointed, inefficient in energy distribution, and lacking any natural armor. Their reputation for endurance," he paused, letting the disdain soak in, "is a fabrication born of myth and media." Daniel sat 3 rows back, spine straight, jaw tight. He said nothing. A few chuckles rippled through the class. A Bracker student to his left, a barrel-chested warrior caste, grunted in amusement. Zyrath didn't flinch. Yes, I know the stories. Running prey for hours, lifting rubble, surviving hostile climates. But biology has limits. Anecdote is not evidence." His limbs swiped to another slide, muscle fiber cross-sections. "Humans possess neither regenerative acceleration nor superior hypertrophy. What they have is determination, which burns out, like anything else." Daniel's fists clenched under the desk. He'd heard it before. Humans were always the underdogs in these halls. Too emotional, too breakable. Cute little monkeys in a galaxy of giants. He glanced right. Kaeli, the Erythian girl with silver skin and bioluminescent veins tracing her temples, was studying the slide, her brow furrowed in concentration. She hadn't laughed. That helped. After class, as the crowd filed out, Kaeli caught up with Daniel. "You didn't ask any questions," she said, voice like soft glass. "Usually you do." He shrugged. "Didn't see the point." She tilted her head. "Are you angry?" "No," he lied, too quickly, then softer. "Just tired of being a walking counter-argument." She offered a small smile, uncertain. "Maybe next time, ask one." He nodded and walked away before he said anything stupid. Because every time she smiled like that, his brain turned into a crashing server. A week later, the class gathered at the Valley. Technically a controlled biome nestled within the Academy's southern grounds, the Valley was 2 square miles of terrain enclosed by energy fencing and high surveillance nodes. Its purpose: to simulate real planetary ecosystems for training. Today's focus was Erythosian apex predators. They were not small. "Don't worry," their supervisor, a lavender-skinned Valen named Cress, assured them. "Sedation collars are triple fail-safed. The creature is asleep. Your task is observation and simulated containment coordination. You will not be touching it. This is non-contact." Daniel exhaled. His heart had been fluttering ever since they arrived. Kaeli stood near him, glancing around the observation ridge that circled the valley floor. Down below, in the center clearing, the predator lay sprawled. 6 legs, sinewy neck, armor-plated torso, teeth that looked stolen from a nightmare. Even unconscious, it exuded menace. "I read their bite force can crack ceramic armor," Kaylee whispered. Daniel swallowed. "That's comforting." Cress began dividing the students into small pods, each assigned to different tasks: respiration monitoring, thermal imaging, electromagnetic feedback. Daniel was assigned to Kaylee's group. Not ideal, considering he couldn't string a proper sentence around her, but worse things had happened. They descended the access slope and took positions behind the reinforced shielding posts. The predator remained still, its sides rising and falling in shallow rhythm. The sedation collar glowed faint blue. Kaeli adjusted her tablet, scanning vitals. Everything's stable. Then the collar flickered. Daniel saw it. One moment, steady light. The next, darkness. Before he could speak, the beast stirred. A low rumble escaped its throat. Its limbs twitched, claws flexed, and then it roared. The sound was pure force, not just heard, but felt. Chests rattled, ears rang. Some students screamed. Chaos erupted. The predator lunged upright, eyes blazing, jaws snapping. It twisted, wrenching against the restraining bolts, then one gave way with a metallic shriek. The other followed. A claw slashed through the ground, sending soil and equipment flying. "Fall back!" Cress shouted from the ridge. "Emergency teams inbound." But it was too late. Daniel turned just in time to see Kaeli freeze. She stood maybe 15 meters from the beast. Her screen had fallen. Her eyes were locked onto the creature, frozen, paralyzed. And the predator saw her. It pivoted and charged. Daniel moved. There was no plan, no logic, just raw instinct. He sprinted, feet barely touching the ground, eyes on Kaeli. He threw himself forward, grabbing her arm, shoving her aside as the predator bore down. Too close. Nowhere to dodge. So he ducked under the beast instead. His shoulder slammed into its underside. The impact nearly drove him to his knees. Claws sliced his back. A scream tore from his throat. But he didn't stop. He pushed upward. Pain exploded through his chest. Ribs crackled. His left shoulder wrenched out of socket with a sickening snap. But the predator rose with him. It flailed, screeching in rage, paws thrashing. Blood streaked down Daniel's spine. Still, he staggered forward, step by agonizing step, legs trembling under the weight. He didn't know how far he moved. Just that the valley edge was ahead. And then, with one final surge, he reached the containment ridge and let out a guttural yell, hurling his burden forward. The beast sailed over the edge, crashing into the containment gorge below. Safety fields snapped into place. The predator thrashed once, then stilled, caught in magnetic suspension. Kaeli collapsed to her knees. Daniel collapsed beside her, vision swimming, ears ringing, air like knives in his chest. Darkness followed. He woke in medbay to sterile lights and the beep of monitors. Voices murmured. A nurse, a human, leaned over him. "Don't try to sit up." Daniel tried anyway. Pain detonated across his torso. He gasped, biting down a cry. "You have 3 cracked ribs," the nurse said calmly. "A dislocated shoulder. Several deep lacerations along your back. One required microsutures near the kidney line." Daniel swallowed. "Kaeli?" "She's fine." He exhaled. "You're not," the nurse added. "Surgery went well. But you'll be immobilized for a while. 6 to 8 weeks for soft tissue healing. Ligaments are torn. We're starting pain management, then we'll begin gentle motion therapy after 4 days. No walking unaided for now." Daniel nodded. Even that hurt. Then the door opened, and Professor Zyrath stepped in. His compound eyes stared at Daniel for a long, unreadable moment. He said nothing. Just walked to the side table, picked up the sedation collar, and placed it gently beside the bed. "The collar didn't fail," he said, voice hushed. "It was tampered with." Daniel blinked. "What?" Zyrath didn't repeat himself. He turned and left without another word. Outside the window, academy lights glowed against the night. Somewhere in the hall, Kaeli waited. Kaeli stood just inside the doorway, her arms clasped tight across her chest. The shimmer of her silver skin looked dimmer than usual under the medbay's cold lights, and her wide violet eyes flicked between Daniel and the IV bag hanging by his bed, like it might start dripping questions instead of fluids. He blinked slowly, wincing as his ribs pulled. She didn't speak. He tried first. "Hey." The word came out dry and hoarse. Pain dulled every syllable, even that one, but it got her moving. Kaeli stepped closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded predator. "I shouldn't have come," she said quietly. I needed to see if you were—" She faltered, then changed direction. I froze. I didn't move. "You—" Daniel shook his head. A tiny motion, barely enough to tug on his neck muscles. "You're fine." "That's not the point," she said, voice suddenly sharp. "You almost died. Because You didn't ask me to do it." Her jaw clenched. "But you did." Daniel looked away. "I didn't think. I just saw you." She didn't reply for a while. The room buzzed with the soft hum of equipment and the distant murmur of alien voices in the hallway. Then she sat, carefully, in the chair beside his bed. "I've been coming here every day," she said. "They said you wouldn't wake up right away, that the nerve trauma was extensive." "It feels extensive," he muttered, managing a crooked half-smile. She didn't smile back. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small recording device, With a flick of her slender fingers, a projection sprang into the air, grainy surveillance footage from the valley. Multiple angles, sound included. He watched it happen again. The flicker of the collar, the beast rising, students scattering, her freezing. Then him. The run, the lift, his own scream, blood streaking down his shirt, and finally, the impossible moment, the throw. Kaylee let the projection play through twice before stopping it. "Everyone's seen it," she said quietly. "It's been reviewed in 12 different languages, translated, analyzed. There's debate footage, reaction reels, even cultural dissection." Daniel blinked. "Cultural dissection? You don't know what you did, Daniel." He didn't answer. His shoulder throbbed. His ribs felt like glass inside a dryer. He couldn't take a deep breath without wanting to scream. Kaylee stood and paced. "In Erythian culture," she said slowly, "protection, when freely given in the face of mortal danger, without expectation of reward, it's not just heroic, it's binding." "Binding?" Daniel asked. "Like honored?" She looked at him, then away. "More than that?" He frowned. "Like a contract?" Kaylee hesitated. "Like a proposal." Daniel stared. She waved her hands quickly. "Not literally, it's symbolic. But your actions matched a very old story, the Shield of Velarin. A protector throws himself between predator and chosen, carries the weight, bleeds, endures. It's sacred." Daniel tried to sit up and failed. "So now I'm what, accidentally engaged?" Kaylee flushed, a shimmer of indigo lighting her temples. "It's not that simple. The elders of my house, my family, they believe it's a sign. They've asked to meet you, privately, soon." Daniel groaned. "I haven't even recovered and I'm being mythologized." "You lifted a creature that weighed more than a hovercar," she snapped, "while injured, and lived. I also tore 3 muscles, dislocated a shoulder, and might have a permanently shortened left clavicle. They know." "Well, that should impress them even more," Daniel muttered. Kaylee looked down, her voice softened again. "You didn't just save me, you humiliated every assumption in this place." Later that week, Daniel sat in a sling-mounted wheelchair, shoulder locked in place with a stabilizing brace, ribs wrapped tight under a loose academy tunic. He hated every second of it. Pain flared with every bump, every jolt. But he had insisted. The investigation briefing was being held in the West Hall, and he wasn't going to miss it. Professor Xyrath stood at the front of the room, flanked by Chancellor Medros and several internal security officers. He looked thinner somehow, or perhaps just dimmer. When he spoke, it was without flourish. "The sedation collar used on the Erythosian apex predator was not defective," he said. "No visual aids this time. It was, however, altered." A murmur spread through the room. The collar's redundancy protocol was bypassed via an external command signal. The transmitter used an encrypted channel only accessible through faculty clearance codes. The murmur became a low roar. Chancellor Medros lifted his hand. "Let him finish." Xyrath's limbs twitched. The investigation uncovered an internal faction, several adjunct instructors, and support staff who believed that integrated interspecies training was inherently unsafe. They engineered the failure in hopes that a catastrophic event would discredit our collaborative programs. Daniel exhaled slowly. It made his ribs ache. "But instead," Xyrath said, eyes sweeping the room, "a human student risked his life to protect another. In doing so, he prevented tragedy and shattered the argument upon which the sabotage rested." The room went silent. The Brackar delegation, seated together in matching crimson robes, looked thunderous. One of them, Goran, Daniel thought his name was, stood abruptly. "This footage," Goran growled, "was it verified? No enhancement? No augmentation?" "Yes," Medros said firmly. "And no enhancement. No artificial augmentation. What he did alone." Some of the Brackar looked furious, others simply stunned. Goran sat slowly, never taking his eyes off Daniel. Xyrath took a breath, his antennae twitching slightly. "I once said," he began, "that human endurance was folklore, that their biology was limited. I did not understand the strength that doesn't show up on scans, the refusal to yield, the the burden carried not by muscle but by choice. His gaze landed directly on Daniel. I was wrong. Later that evening, Kaylee helped Daniel back to his quarters. He insisted on walking the last few meters, every step measured, slow, stabbing. Inside, he collapsed carefully into the reclining seat. She handed him a thermal wrap and a slow-release analgesic strip for his shoulder. You know, he said, as she adjusted the sling to keep pressure off the healing ligaments, I still can't believe you froze. She stiffened. He smiled gently. And I'm really glad you did. Kaylee stared at him. That's a strange way to say thank you. I'm serious. If you hadn't frozen, I wouldn't have had to do anything stupid. And if I hadn't done anything stupid, I'd still be sitting in that lecture hall wondering if you'd ever talk to me again. She sat down across from him. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed, then flared softly. You are strange. I get that a lot. A moment of quiet passed between them. Then she said, They still want to meet you. He sighed. Of course they do. You don't have to go. I told them you're not ready. He looked at her, expression unreadable. I think I'll go. Kaylee blinked. Really? I want to understand what they think I did, because all I know is, I didn't do it for the myth, I did it for you. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The Erythian diplomatic wing of the academy didn't resemble the rest of the campus. Where most buildings leaned toward minimalist alloy and functional lighting, this wing was softer, built with sweeping lines and slow-moving lights that pulsed like quiet breath. Bioluminescent walls shimmered with embedded spores, their hues shifting in rhythm with sound. Every word spoken echoed as a glow. Silence shimmered differently. Even footsteps had a light of their own. Daniel felt absurdly out of place. His left arm was still bound in a sling, the shoulder held immobile by an exo-support frame. His ribs were wrapped under a tunic one size too large. Even walking was a chore. The strain across his midsection made his steps short and cautious. He hated how everyone kept glancing his way with that mixture of awe and concern, like he was part hero, part porcelain. Kaylee walked beside him, close but silent. She hadn't explained what exactly this meeting was supposed to be, just that it would happen in the listening chamber, just that her family would be there, just that he should be respectful, and preferably not mention that he couldn't lift his own shirt without gasping. The chamber itself was built like a spiral shell, each curve of the room lined with tiered seating, soft mats instead of chairs. In the center, a low platform with glowing threads of biofabric woven into its surface. Kaylee led him forward, every step producing ripples of violet across the floor. Waiting in the chamber were 8 Erythians, 3 elders, 4 dignitaries in flowing garb, and 1 imposing woman with intricate markings across her collarbone and jaw. She looked nothing like Kaylee. Broader shoulders, shorter hair, same sharp eyes. Kaylee bowed deeply. Daniel did his best approximation of it, which mostly involved not groaning aloud as his ribs protested. The eldest among them, a man whose skin glowed like pale starlight, stood and addressed Daniel in calm, deliberate tones. You carried a predator that weighed 3 times your mass. I did, Daniel said. You were injured while doing so. Yes. You chose to intervene when others fled. I didn't think about it, he said. I just saw she needed help. The old man considered this. Then your body acted as your heart commanded. Daniel wasn't sure how to answer that. Another elder, this one, wearing a braided strand of stone and light around her forehead, tilted her head. You understand the meaning of your action to us? I'm starting to, Daniel said carefully. The bond of Velaran is not just story, the woman with the collarbone markings said. Her voice was sharper than the others. It is precedent, it is law. What you did, before many witnesses, aligns with ancient right. The act of shielding is declaration. Declaration of what? Daniel asked, even though he already knew. Protection, Kaylee said softly, and unity. He looked at her. Her eyes were not pleading or nervous, just calm, present. You didn't ask for any of this. No, she said, but I also didn't stop it. The silence that followed was long and full of unspoken things. Then the old man spoke again. We will not force custom upon one unaware. You are not Erythian. But we ask only this. Understand the weight of what you've done. You changed how our youth see humanity, how we see it. I never meant to change anything, Daniel said. I just didn't want her to die. That, said the woman with the markings, is exactly why everything changed. When he returned to the medical center, Daniel found Professor Xyrath waiting. The insectoid scholar stood by the window, arms tucked behind his back. The collar from the predator still hung at his side in a containment case, now sealed and tagged with forensic markings. Daniel approached slowly. You're walking more steadily, Xyrath observed, without turning. I'm pretending to, Daniel said. Hurts like hell. Pain suggests life, imperfection, recovery. Daniel sat gingerly in the nearest chair. You came to scold me again? No, Xyrath said. I came to apologize. That made Daniel raise an eyebrow. Xyrath turned to face him, antennae shifting with what might have been discomfort. In your first lecture with me, I referred to humans as tools of biology. I suggested your capabilities were overstated. I remember. I also suggested endurance was anecdotal, not quantifiable. I cited your species' skeletal fragility as a critical flaw. Daniel nodded once. You weren't wrong. I was incomplete. The professor moved closer, laying the collar case on a nearby table. You carried a living predator on fractured ribs, while your left scapular tendon was partially torn, with a dislocated shoulder and active arterial bleeding. Daniel grimaced. I was aware. Biology should have failed you, Xyrath said. Yet it didn't. That is fascinating. I'm glad it's educational. Xyrath paused. The sabotage has shaken this institution. Mixed species training is under review. Some call for its cancellation. Daniel looked up. Because of me? Because of what nearly happened, but also because of what did. Xyrath turned back toward the window. You are now a symbol. To some, an inspiration. To others, a complication. Daniel exhaled. I just want to finish my degree. That may be the one thing you now cannot do quietly. A week passed. Daniel's wounds began healing in increments, slow, frustrating, real. The doctors realigned his shoulder after a nerve mapping scan revealed no permanent damage. Movement would return, they said, after weeks of carefully guided physiotherapy. Ribs were another matter, no real fix for those, except time and discipline. The claw wounds across his back were deep, but clean. They itched constantly. He attended his sessions twice daily, morning for mobility, evening for strength, rebuilding. Kaeli visited often, sometimes with strange Erythian fruit she claimed promoted cell regeneration, other times just to sit in quiet while he struggled through banded resistance exercises. One afternoon, during a breathing drill, she said, I was told by my aunt that you're a living paradox. That's generous, Daniel said, huffing through the pain of full lung expansion. Most people say I'm just stubborn. She said the act of lifting the predator was impossible, not because of physics, but because of story. And yet you did it. Daniel looked at her. That's the second time someone said I did something impossible. She tilted her head. Is that uncomfortable? No, he said slowly. But I wonder what happens when the myth stops being convenient. Kaeli seemed to consider that. Then the myth changes. Back on campus, the Brackar delegation requested a meeting. Daniel declined the first 2 times. The third time, he accepted. They met in a shielded combat chamber, though no weapons were involved. Goran stood at the center, flanked by 2 younger warriors. I came to see the one who bore the beast, Goran said. Daniel remained standing, though the brace still covered half his torso. You could have watched the footage. I did, Goran said, but footage does not carry scent, or heat, or shame. Shame? I trained my sons to believe that strength lives in might. That resilience is about withstanding injury, not enduring it. Then they watched you carry death on your back, leaking blood and breath, and they said, why didn't the Brackar do that? Daniel didn't answer. Goran stepped forward and bowed not deeply, but deliberately. I do not understand your people, he said, but I respect you. Thanks, Daniel said quietly. I think. The night before he returned to lecture halls, Kaeli visited again. This time she brought a small item wrapped in soft cloth. Inside was a charm, a woven strand of glowing thread and bone, shaped like a shield. It's from my family, she said. Symbol of the bond. You're not bound unless you accept it. But they wanted you to have it. Daniel held it gently. Do you believe in the bond? She hesitated. I believe in you. That's enough for now. He smiled. It'll have to be. I've got 2 months of rehab ahead. Kylie touched his shoulder, light and brief. You carried the weight, she said. Now let us carry some of it with you. 4 weeks later, Daniel stepped back into the lecture hall he had once sat in silently, jaw tight, words swallowed. He didn't walk as smoothly as he used to. His shoulder brace was gone now, but a compression sleeve still hugged his upper arm, and his left side occasionally tensed without warning. His ribs ached if he twisted too fast. But he was standing, moving, breathing without fire in his lungs, and that was something. The room fell quiet the moment he entered. No one stared. Not openly. But every species present, Bracker, Erythian, Violin, Orsani, glanced his way. Quiet awe lingered in the silence like fog. No longer mockery, no longer doubt. Just wait. Kylie was already seated in the second row. When she saw him, her face softened in quiet greeting. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. He sat beside her. They exchanged no words. It was enough to share the same space again. Professor Zyrath entered last. He moved slower than usual, the long limbs of his kind typically fluid and rapid. Today, he seemed deliberately restrained. He stepped to the console, tapped the screen once, and dimmed the lights. A new image hovered above the crowd, a still frame of Daniel, shoulders bowed, blood trailing down his back, lifting the predator high above the ground. It froze mid-motion, the beast's claws raking at the air. Daniel's face contorted not in glory, but pain. This, Zyrath began softly, is not a simulation. No one breathed. This was not performed in controlled conditions. It was not planned. It was not safe. What you see here is a biological impossibility, not in terms of physics, but in terms of survival instinct. The image dissolved. In our last session before the field exercise, I stated that humans were weak, that their endurance was exaggerated mythology. I implied, and perhaps believed, that their presence in cross-species training was more symbolic than practical. He turned. I was wrong. There was no flourish in his tone, just the stark gravity of someone reshaping his foundation in public. What I failed to calculate was not strength of limb, or threshold of oxygen deprivation, or even the pain tolerance of an injured mammal. I failed to account for a variable I had no methodology to quantify. He pointed slowly toward Daniel. Will. No one laughed, no one even whispered. That, Zyrath continued, may be the most dangerous survival trait in the galaxy, not because it breaks rules, but because it ignores them. Because it tells the body to keep moving even after the body has screamed enough. And it is not reserved for humans alone, but humans have refined it in a way that even the Bracar have paused to consider. He tapped the screen again. Let this be a lesson, not just in physiology, but in presumption. The lights returned. And then, with the strangest tone of dry humor Daniel had ever heard from the professor, Zyrath added, I suggest you all do your reading before the next field assignment, especially the part on pain receptors. Apparently, they're optional. A quiet ripple of laughter broke the tension. The lesson began. Later that day, Daniel walked the perimeter path behind the medical wing slowly, deliberately. His physical therapist had advised 20 minutes of motion per hour of sitting. Breathing deeper still tugged at his ribs, but it no longer made him wince every time. Kylie met him by the garden's edge. The bioluminescent plants were just beginning their dusk cycle glow, casting the space in soft blue and purple tones. A species of soft-winged moths fluttered overhead. Somewhere nearby, water flowed through an Erythian root fountain that sang as it fell. You walked without assistance, she said. He nodded. First time this week. Do you feel proud? I feel sore. She smiled. That's also a kind of pride. They sat by the low wall of the garden, facing the artificial moon rising over the campus dome. Daniel turned the charm she had given him, bone and thread and memory, over in his palm. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous, she replied. Her tone was dry, teasing. He ignored the bait. I know what I said before. about not understanding the bond, about not wanting to be mythologized. Kaeli looked over. You've changed your mind? No, he said, eyes still on the charm. But I've realized something. If I'm going to be part of a story, I want to make sure it's told right. She waited. So, if your people believe in symbols and sacrifice and the way someone acts when everything's falling apart, then fine. Let them believe. And you? She asked softly. I believe in choices. I made mine, no matter what happened after. Kaeli touched his hand, steady and sure. I've been asked to speak at the Assembly of Accord next month, she said. They want me to talk about the event. About you. Daniel blinked. You going to say I'm some kind of divine sign? I was thinking of starting with, he couldn't even hold his tablet steady around me. He groaned. Great, my legacy. Kaeli leaned closer. Or maybe I'll just say he lifted the impossible. The official investigation closed with 8 staff members dismissed, their research credentials revoked, charges would follow. The Academy tightened its interspecies protocol and added new safeguards to all sedation tech. Mixed species training programs not only remained, but expanded. The Brackar delegation, in an uncharacteristic show of humility, volunteered to co-develop new endurance trials alongside human counterparts. One of them reportedly asked for Daniel by name. He declined. His physical therapist would have killed him. Daniel continued his therapy regimen, each week regaining a little more strength, a little more mobility. The pain faded, but the memory didn't focus. He still had the scars across his back, 5 jagged lines, neatly sutured now, but visible when the light hit just right. They itched sometimes. Other times, they ached. Mostly, they reminded him of how close things had come to ending. One day, while changing in the med bay, he caught sight of his back in the mirror. For the first time, he didn't look away. Graduation approached. Finals loomed. Papers were due. The usual scramble returned. But something had shifted. Daniel wasn't invisible anymore. People greeted him in the halls, some formally, others with curious warmth. He was no longer the quiet human at the edge of the class. He was the one who had lifted the predator. And yet, in his own mind, he was just Daniel. Still recovering, still figuring out what came next. Kaeli stood with him at the commencement ceremony, not holding hands, not declaring anything, just present. Their story, like his healing, didn't need to rush. As the names were called, Zyrith watched from the side of the stage. When Daniel's turn came, their eyes met. No words. Just the faintest nod. Acknowledgement, not of biology, not of error, but of will. And, maybe, just maybe, of hope.